Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Drexel University Sport Coaching Leadership Program webinar. I'm thrilled to welcome Michelle de Highden all the way from Melbourne, Australia. Good morning to you, Michelle, and we'll dive in a little bit. I'm thrilled that she can join us and chat a little bit about preparations for the Olympics coming up. But before we do that, I just want to share a couple of sessions coming up next week. We're going to be talking to Anna Swisher from USA Weightlifting and all that they're doing in the coach ed space with the COVID-19 times that we're experiencing. And then Ann Davis. I don't know how well I could have planned that. Anna and Ann, week after each other. Ann Davis from tennis is going to be talking about what's going on there in the tennis space based down there in Orlando. So last week we had a great conversation with Andy Bradshaw from UK Coaching and all that's going on there with the lockdown and support of coaches. And one of your buddies, Michelle Liam McCarthy, back in August, talked about assessing coaching and did a fabulous job there. He's doing some wonderful research in supporting coach learning. Back in July, we had a great session with Madeline Barlow, the sports psych at Drexel, looking at empathy and the art of listening. And way back in April, we had Karen Freeman, one of the former nutritionists with the San Diego and LA Chargers, talking to us about taking care of ourselves with nutrition. So, Michelle, let's dive in. Really excited about this conversation because motivation has been a big one for many of those that we've been talking about, not only for athletes but for coaches. So why don't we jump in? Tell us a little bit about how things are going with the prep for the Olympics with the Aussie gymnastics team, and what are some of the challenges you guys are facing, and we'll go from there in terms of what you guys are learning.
Cool. Look, thanks very much, Cam. Really appreciate this opportunity to come along today. Now, just checking, Cam, has my screen come up? No? Cam, has my screen come up? Can you see that? Right. Look, thanks very much, Cam, for inviting me along. Super excited to, I guess, chat to you guys, but also to learn about what you're doing as well. So what I'm going to do is just cover off on a couple of things and activities that we've been doing. Nothing different, I think, to what you guys have been doing over there, but I guess I just thought it was an opportunity to share a bit of a status update of where we are in our challenges. And like I said to Cam when we were chatting about this, super keen to see and give you guys an opportunity to share. And, you know, absolutely, I'm sure we can all learn from each other. So couple of key things just to talk about where are our preparations for Tokyo. Our key challenges that we're currently experiencing, because I'm in Melbourne in Australia, and we're in severe lockdown, 5K radius restrictions and curfews, so it's pretty interesting times. And then looking at I guess the exciting things that we can do and the opportunities that we've got with the situation we're in, and how we can use them when we navigate our space getting out of this. So just to kick off and give you a bit of an overview, we had World Championships last year, actually this time last year exactly. We were in Stuttgart. Australia missed the women's team qualification for Olympics by 0.1, which for the girls was devastating, and the coaches. And so we had one athlete from the team, the one on the left, qualify for Olympics. And we also, in our men's team, had a young guy qualify for the high bar final. So those two athletes have both qualified for Tokyo. We have opportunities to qualify individuals in our sport, both through the World Cup Series and through continental championships. And two of the athletes in the middle were actually at World Cup in Baku. right when COVID hit and the competition was halfway through and the competition stopped. So the two girls were sent home and quarantined for 2 weeks, as were the guys. And in actual fact, they took the results from qualification, which meant the young Australian athlete who was leading the beam qualification has now missed her chance for Olympics because the Japanese won the qualification round and she's leading and they've taken that as the status. So pretty devastating for an athlete to think she's been in contention for Olympics and leading a World Cup series to not having a chance. So things have been pretty tough for the girls. Our continental championships, like everything else, was cancelled and scheduled for 12 months later. We have no date, no time, no ability to get out of the country right now. But what I thought I'd do is just share with you an example that we looked at, which was pre-COVID, which we thought was an opportunity to help us with our junior team. So Australia being very diverse and geographically challenging, we actually did a selection for our national team virtually. So using Dartfish, it's one of our, systems in which we can connect the athletes and the coaches with the national coach. Our trampoline athletes have used it, and our you can see the images here I've got up on the screen. We had a young fella from Dartfish Australia come to national camp, and you can see he's working with two of our senior athletes to understand the things that they're looking at. So this started back in January. So what we did with our junior national team, we actually gave all the coaches a license, taught them how to use it throughout last year, and set some protocols for assessment. And they then videoed the juniors back in their daily training environment. And we used that those videos, had the judges get together in a room, review the videos and select the junior team to go to Montreal in March this year. And in actual fact, we came back 2 days before the shutdown hit. So really fortunate, but it gave us an opportunity to really present and test something with the coaches of what we could do. So I guess looking at where we're at right now, this is a quick image of our juniors who were at camp in February before we headed off to Montreal. And they're doing some planning activities, they're doing some team building, looking at what attributes they see in the senior athletes and what they feel is important to be successful. So we've tried to be able to build on some of these activities. And obviously the Tokyo selection's enormously challenging for our seniors. The restrictions throughout Australia are really different. So I'm in Melbourne and we've had a second outbreak or a second wave here. And I think I'm in week 10 or week 11. I'm not quite sure, but we had 3 weeks of kind of more restrictions and things have been pretty tough. We've got a couple of our senior athletes training, but everyone else is doing remote training online, and the rest of the country, Perth, Queensland, Sydney, they're all training. All the athletes are training, but with severe restrictions, obviously. So very tough for everyone in Victoria, but everyone else has started back. We've worked pretty hard through the COVID shutdown to keep our athlete and coach engagement. So building on the stuff from January, we had our athlete wellbeing and engagement team do catch-ups with the athletes as groups, and they were, particularly in the first instance, super excited. We did updates. I'm sure you guys have done the same. Set up a Trello board so the coaches could get what we call one source of truth, or the valid information about what's happening with Olympic selection, what's happening with the restrictions, what can we do. And we set up a board for both the athletes and the coaches, which I think was really good because they could just go to one key spot. Our national AW&E team have worked really closely with the AAS, the Australian Institute of Sport, to provide individual and group support for our athletes. We've had guest coaches come in. It's same. I'm sure they're all things that you guys have done. I guess eight months on, the challenges are still the uncertainty. We have no selection date for our qualification events. We did an update for all our national team coaches in men's, women's, rhythmic and trampoline last Monday. We can't travel out of the country. Even the European championships have been shifted to Turkey. There were competitions on the weekend. And all the coaches, particularly our non-English speaking coaches, are like, why can't we go? What's going on? So we've got a national policy that says at this point in time, there's no travel anywhere. And our national camps are still non-existent. I've got a meeting on Friday this week to decide whether our December national camp for each, what we call gym sport, which is the men's, women's, rhythmic and tramp. So to decide whether our scheduled camps for December are going to go ahead. So in a bit of a snapshot, that's kind of where we're at, Cam. Did you want to open it up to the group to see if, are there any key questions around this or key challenges that others have got that they're keen to share?
Yeah, love to hear any questions. A couple from me, just in terms of the Trello format. How have you guys used that? Has that been a sort of one-way communication of, using that to engage those out there with the latest information, or is it a two-way piece where athletes and coaches and you guys from the admin side can interact?
Look, to be honest, it's really been the one way.
Yeah.
I think partly because from our point of view, we wanted to make sure that there was one space people could go to. All right. So we simply used it as a depository of key information. And I think because there was so much information on social media and they were hearing so much happening, they needed to have one place to go. Because it's just another tool and it's something else, it was easy, particularly for our non-English speaking coaches, to access it, and they could either do it through the app or through the website. But it can be used as an interactive tool, but it's not anything we've driven in that space. Probably more a strategy than anything else.
Yeah. And then in terms of what you're doing with Dartfish, did you take anything from using that sort of virtual camp component to what you'll be doing down the track?
Yeah, Dartfish, I guess we kicked it off probably back in 2015. So developing our coaching courses, we had about 2,500 video clips of different drills and activities and teaching skills. So worked with Dartfish to get our whole entire coaching course video clips in there. And I guess for the last 2 years, part of the national team program, which is what we've been doing, is every time we go to camp, we now have a depository of, so for example, Georgia, with the athlete who's qualified for Olympics, we've got storage of her for 2 years. So an example is she's going through with the Dartfish guy here in the picture, and she's talking to him about her vault. So she's trying to upgrade. And throughout this year, the ability for him to be able to get training footage, analyze it for her. Her coaches are Russian. They don't speak English particularly well. And you've got a guy there who's there to support us. This young fella's had wanted to head off to Tokyo. So he was keen to work with us. And then the image down the bottom, the young fella, Tyson, he's made high bar finals at World Championships. So he's got a good shot, and high bar is high risk, and his routine has got multiple release in a row. And here he's trying to work out, if he's leaving at this angle, what's too late, what's too early, and he's trying to teach the guy so that he can help analyze it. So that's been ongoing, which is good. So for Georgia, we've got 2 years of footage. We've been able to kind of connect with the coaches. So I actually had Tyson's Russian coach practice syncing 2 video clips of one of the guys vaulting from end on and side on so that he could see the difference. So we've tried to keep the engagement in that space. And I guess Dartfish has been useful. All the webinars we've held are all stored there. So We've released a series of collections for coach learning as part of an education month. So yeah, we've tried to build on what we've got, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like. I mean, there are so many packages out there now, and I'm thrilled to hear that you've been able to utilise Dartfish in that respect, because I know a lot of people have struggled. Is there a reason why you went with Dartfish over other sort of options? And I know you're probably not receiving commission from Dartfish for any advertisement. So we can put that disclaimer in. But yeah, do you want to just talk a little bit about that? Just the way that you've decided to go with them and how they've helped you.
Yeah, look, I think I had a bit of a history myself. When I was running a private club, they had come on board. It was a club within a private girls' school, and they had come on board and worked with the physical education team at the time. So this is going back early 2000s. And Gymnastics Australia had worked with Dartfish previously.
Right.
And I guess the contact had been there. And what I didn't want is a tool that was just a depository for our videos. I wanted to be able to support the coaches and help the coaches and athletes understand skill learning. So because there was the ability to analyze the skills, we'd already had that relationship with them in the past. I said I did a bit of a research program around what was there, but I think we came back to this because we were familiar with it and we'd used it. But you're right, Cam, there's plenty of systems out there. Yeah. And I guess the other one thing you can see in the images, the AIS, which is based in Canberra, has cameras set up throughout the facility. And there was previous links, those cameras had previously gone into a storage hub so that they all linked and you could look at the footage. So I guess it was just a good step for us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. The right fit. And then what about, just in terms of the global communications, how do you guys feel like you're matching up with how others are able to manage, equally complex situations, but just how you feel Australia is managing things relative to, say, what's happening in New Zealand, obviously what's going on in Asia and Europe, and over here in North America, who really knows what's going on? But yeah, what's your gauge there on how you feel like you compare?
Look, I think with New Zealand we're pretty similar because New Zealand did a complete shutdown and they almost wiped out COVID-19 completely. They had minimal transitions. Australia was talking about developing a travel hub between the two. And then Victoria had some outbreaks, challenges with hotel quarantine and a few other things. So that's been put on hold, but it's back on discussion. Mm-hmm. The athletes in New Zealand are training. I was on a chat probably about 6 weeks ago, which was an Oceania representative technical committee throughout the world. So each continental leader came on to talk, and it was women's gymnastics specifically. And I think everyone's been challenged with second outbreaks. So I guess in Australia, we're pretty fortunate that the majority of the country is training. Victoria's in shutdown and has been for nearly 3 months. But in comparison, I think there's a feeling from some of the athletes that they're being left behind, which is pretty tough, especially seeing, some events being run over the weekend in Europe. But I think, Cam, it's actually hard to tell because, is that sustainable? Like, are they going to get second outbreaks? And I don't know. Asia, same again, that's hard to tell. I think some of the coaches and athletes were really frustrated because they had put the athletes in a hub and they'd been training. Chinese national championships were run last weekend and had some enormous scores. And the routines have been put up on, YouTube. You can see what they're doing. But I guess it's about controlling the controllables, Yeah.
So how are you managing the communications with the athletes and coaches in that respect with when they see that information, when that information gets released, how the highs and lows of all that whether it's the fear of missing out or trying to stay super focused on the controllables, as you mentioned. How are you managing that?
Yeah. Well, look, what I'll do is I'll flick one of the things I guess we've tried to do to answer that question is to really look at what are the opportunities. Let's look at the positives. We are where we are. What can we do? Sorry, what can we control? What can we do right now? What can we develop? So from a management or administrative point of view, what can I do to support the coaches? Because we do have a number of non-English speaking coaches who this is really challenging. One particular coach spent the first 6 weeks of our first shutdown in her apartment by herself in her pajamas. Like, that's the reality. So for me, it's about what's going to work and what can we do to support them. So one of the things that we did do was we kicked off some virtual camps. We did a bit of, and same again, I'm talking to a group of people, I'm sure you guys have done similar, but a key thing was to connect the athletes and coaches. And it was funny, the first time we did it, seeing up on the screen 30 athletes on the screen. They were so excited just to actually see somebody outside their own space. And I don't think that's diminished, because even now, Victorians are training online still. They're only allowed to see people online. But when we've done our national camps, they've actually seen the guys in Perth and the guys in Queensland, and it's kept that connection. So whilst we did it initially and it was super exciting, even the guys who were around the country, I think it's really helped. We've tried to do some fun activities. We did a Master Chef cook-off. So we had the juniors on one day and the seniors on another. And we had the dietitian from the Australian Institute of Sport come on. She wanted to not just do a cooking session, but to deliver some educational content with that. And so they had to cook a meal for their family and serve it up. And we did a polling. They had to poll and get someone to vote. So the juniors beat the seniors. And when we next come to camp, all the participants are going to get an AIS cookbook. So they really enjoyed that. At the time the athletes were cooking, I took the coaches into a separate room and we got some coaches from other sports. So we had the cycling guys and the swimming coaches down at Sassy with Ash Ross. I got these coaches to come in and chat to them, because actually the cycling guys hadn't stopped training and the swimmers were already back in the pool, and it helped our coaches go, oh, well, we're not there yet. What does that look like? We've focused in these sessions on the education and I guess building on some of the stuff in January. So for the athletes, we've done some work on understanding baseline fitness. So they're stuck at home. They can't go out of a 5K radius. They can't go to a park. They can't go anywhere. We're allowed outside for an hour a day. That's what it's been like for 6 weeks. And now it's changed. We're allowed outside for 2 hours, but still within the 5K radius. So for them, they can't do anything. So it's been about trying to go, okay, well, these are the activities that will build your anaerobic fitness. This underlines everyone's baseline. So we've had the team from AIS work with the athletes and coaches together and separately. We did a practical session a couple of weeks ago, so that the session was delivered, presented to the coaches so that they could accommodate the training program for the week if they needed to. The picture I've got up here on screen is one of our national team physiotherapists. She's been running some prehab programs with the athletes, initially focusing on gluteal activation. Last session was on shoulder stability. She helped work with the AIS team on some return to training guidelines. So we've done workshops on how can we graduate that return safely so that we don't get re-injured. And then what we've done actually recently is a discovery session. So the quick clip down on the screen was building on the activity from January. We asked the senior athletes a series of questions around what's important for them to learn when they come to camp. What does that look like? So the virtual camps have been pretty much, we've stuck to a 2 hour, and part of that's because gymnastics, most of the athletes are still training, and some are back to 30 hours a week. So to add another 4 or 5 hours onto a training week to me seems ridiculous. So we've tried to target it when the athletes can either finish training a little bit early. We've got to accommodate Perth, who's 3 hours behind us. But it's an opportunity to get all the coaches and athletes together. And we've done juniors and seniors. So that's essentially one of the key things that we've done to keep that connection, Cam.
Yeah, I love it. And a question that just came in of has there been any discussion or how are you guys managing this incredible uncertainty that the games may not happen? Has that conversation been broached? Is that, for athletes and coaches thinking like how is that topic being tackled?
So initially, when obviously it was the delay and everything else, we actually had weekly catch-ups with the national team coaches because, my role, I work with the coaches, right? And I say to the administrators, I'm saying, look, if you're trying to help the athletes manage this situation, you've got to make sure the coaches truly understand what's going on. They're in daily contact with them. So if the coaches understand, they can support the athletes to work through this. So in the first shutdown back in, March and April, we had ongoing quick catch-ups, like 20-minute catch-ups. We used the Trello board to help with updates. At the virtual camps, we would always provide an opportunity for an update of something that's happening at the moment. So our national performance director would either come on at the beginning and the end and give an update. So that's been really helpful. And I guess particularly early in the piece, a lot of the coach webinars we did were around updates in that space. But I think, Cam, the reality is it's rearing its head again, which is why last Monday we had the update around travel. We gave the coaches an update on what it looks like at the moment, what the Australian Olympic Committee has looked like in terms of pre-Tokyo, post-Tokyo, but what they need to do, 2 weeks quarantine in a hub before we leave, what it looks like when we get there. And the questions are starting to come now, well, particularly because they've seen the events. National championships are May. So we know we've got no events this year, but the World Cup qualifiers that I mentioned, that's where our athletes have a chance of qualifying, and they're February. So how realistic is that? So the question is definitely coming back. And the reality is the AOC has had regular catch-ups with what we call our Tokyo long list. So I'm sure US, you guys have a similar thing. So initially they were doing weekly webinars, the same. They were hosting it. It was simply a 20-minute catch-up on X, Y, and Z. And each, probably fortnight now, maybe it's gone down to monthly, the AOC has been sharing updates of where they're at to keep everyone in the loop. But I think the reality is a couple of our athletes who were nearing the end of their careers are still sitting on the fence, and a couple of our top athletes. And the best that we can do is to provide the support for them and around them with their coaches and their support team. But I mean, I don't know that anyone knows.
No, you're right. And that connects to what I was thinking, and you just touched on it in terms of athletes that were at the end of their career or not even at the end of their career, but were wondering how much longer they could go, because a 4-year Olympic cycle is long enough, but to call it a 5-year Olympic cycle, for a lot of people, it's just pushed them to a point where you can't sort of just try or just see how it goes. It's either you're in and you're fully in, and there's no fraction to that. So how are those conversations been navigated, particularly with those that you sort of feel like are on the fence, or they may not make it, not because of their health and not because of the reality of the games, just they're not in it.
Yeah. And I think probably if I'm looking at the men's team and the trampoline guys, they're probably okay. They're older, more mature athletes, and realistically, there's probably one or two, a World Cup spot on vault maybe, and a World Cup spot, and an Oceania spot. But The Continental Championships are in Japan. We have a window of the 15th of May to the 15th of June and no date. That's it. And they're being combined with Asian Championships. So realistically, there's nothing we can do. We don't know when it's going to be. We can't, the coaches are trying to plan, so it's challenging. Same again, we go back to the conversations, control what you can control. But I think because the tramp and the mag athletes are older, they've got other parts of their lives and other things that they're working on. They're just navigating the things that sit around that. A couple of the female athlete or the female group saying there's really just one spot left for Olympics. And I think the difference between the athlete who's qualified and has got her individual berth and the rest, it's hard. Maybe it's better because they don't see each other. I'm not sure. But I think the individual support that we've given them has been critical. Both I have the conversations with the coaches to make sure they're clear and they know what's going on and they know they can just pick up the phone, or they talk to our performance director, or specifically the athletes, they'll have weekly catch-ups with the AW&E team. You know, we have a team of 2 staff who work with all our athletes across the gym sports. And I think like I said, there's a couple of girls sitting on the fence, and I mean, you can't train 50-50, can you? It's a tough situation, probably for that group who are vying for one spot and were considering retiring anyway, you know.
And I think that's they're the weeds, they're the messy conversations that I think we're all really struggling with. It's there's only so much, whether it's from a planning perspective, but also just from a life balance perspective. You know, so much of what we're talking about now is athlete wellness and athlete well-being, and sort of, you know, to your MasterChef competition, who would have thought that would have been a nutritionist dream of educating athletes. Families, probably more importantly, it's athletes and their families about what are some you know, it's probably some very easy but very very significant steps to move forward. So
and I think that I was talking actually to one of our AW&E guys the other day, and she said she's gone from having one of the guys at our National Training Centre studying at the tertiary level to having all 5 of them involved in something. And to me, this has provided an opportunity for that. Now they're back training fully. We have our men's team is centralised in Canberra now. We have guys around the country training as well, but we have 5 of the guys training at the institute, and they've been back training for 10 weeks, maybe a smidge longer, and they've gone from not having other stuff outside to getting their study organised, you know, whatever that might look like for them. So I guess that's provided the opportunity, you know, to have the conversations about, well, what else are you doing?
Yeah, no, that's huge. Quick clarification, AW&E?
Athlete Wellbeing and Engagement.
Yes, thank you.
So,
that around the world, the role of that athlete, you know, whether it's athlete wellness. I've heard that some of the British programs talk about athlete enforcement. So really looking at the rules and regulations, but definitely the sort of overall wellness of the athlete. So that I think is becoming more and more an important part of how we're all looking out for our athletes and their well-being. Yeah.
And I think one of the things, and I guess it's part of my role is to work across what I see as our 4 tiers of coaches: our national team coaches, our developing coaches, athletes who are transitioning into coaching, and then the mentors. So that's the space that I work in. And I guess I've really been pushing and encouraging that, well, if the coaches aren't okay, the athletes won't be okay. You know, so in actual fact, the support provided for the coaches has been paramount through this, and I think is critical. Not just for their own personal well-being and optimal performance, but to make sure that they can connect appropriately with the athletes in the right way, you know, and have the good supportive conversations. And that's been pretty tough, I think, particularly for some coaches. Yeah.
A couple more questions, but do you want to flick through your slides and then we can
Yeah,
we'll go from there.
cool. All right. So I guess what I thought I'd do is just share with you a couple of other examples of things that we have either initiated, started, or are doing, moving forward in terms of the opportunities and stuff. So we received a grant from Women Leaders in Sport, which was to focus on female development, coach development. So essentially, we've literally just selected the group. It'll get announced this week. And part of the program was to link with the University of Queensland. So to incorporate some tertiary learning, which actually contributes to a graduate certificate in coaching. So 2 of their modules, quality coaching and applied psychology, have actually been delivered with other major key sports in Australia. So tennis, cricket, AFL have been working together over the last 2 to 3 years to deliver these modules with their leading coaches. So I'd had all this set up at the beginning of the year, and actually it was like, well, they shut it down. So what we've done is we've converted the 2-day program of the first module for quality coaching into 3 times 2-hour virtual sessions, and we'll run our first session at the beginning of November, so in about a month. So we've worked with the UQ team, University of Queensland, to what does that look like, how do we convert it, and so the next gen program, this group of coaches that have been selected had to apply, had to show evidence of self-learning previously, and part of it's a 2-year program. So they'll go through a program and they'll do these modules over 2 years. So we're actually running 2 of the university modules in a virtual session. We're doing a Wednesday, a Saturday, and a Wednesday so that there's opportunity for learning and reflection in between. And we'll be joined by, at the moment, I think it's AFL, cricket, tennis, and swimming. So it's an opportunity for our coaches to be able to connect and meet with other coaches who are learning and working in the same space. And for me, that's been really important. We'll kick off next week with some work with the coaches on doing some self-evaluation and looking at their development plans and mapping out what the 2-year journey will look like. And then looking at the image, you can see when the coaches come to camp, we have a group of mentors who work with them. We have the AIS sports science, sports med team that will work with the coaches on areas that they've identified that they want to learn. So this program is going to kick off shortly. And I guess we had to stop, rethink and reassess, well, what does it look like? And in actual fact, it will end up probably saving the coaches, because they have to partially fund themselves. It's not fully funded. It's going to save them money. They don't have to travel. They've got to commit to the online space. And we're running the 2 of them this year to see kind of what that looks like. So this was an opportunity for us to stop and rethink and perhaps come up with a different, maybe better, I guess, I'm not sure. So we'll see. The next opportunity, I guess, or the next thing I've looked at is really looking at this piloting a virtual coach program. So I'm going to kick this off in a couple of weeks. And I see this almost as a 2-part program. Not quite sure, but for me, it's about creating conversations. So Cam, one of the things I think I mentioned before was that I have the 4 gym sports, and they don't talk to each other. They don't connect, which the men's coaches are here, the women's coaches are here, the trampoline and the rhythmic. And to get a conversation amongst the national team coaches who are all working in the same sport, it just doesn't happen. And I think some of the best coach learning happens when you can have a conversation, I guess, like this. So what I've done is just to try and look at, well, I can't bring these coaches all together. So this is looking at our next tier of coaches down. Let's look at what this might look like. So I'm just going to run a pilot, 5 topics in 5 weeks. So an hour and a half, and have a break between week 3 and week 4. Just to kind of chill, but look at bringing together 4 coaches from each of these gym sports. I've targeted them, so I've kind of selected them because I know they're super keen And the idea is to test it and pilot it, but to look at what this can look like going into next year. And part of it's about that community of practice, if you like. Is this a group that is sustainable? Would they maintain the connections when things go back to COVID normal? But I'm not sure. But it was something that there was a group of coaches who applied for the Next Gen program who missed out, but they were super keen. And I'd been mulling over this idea for a while, so I just thought, okay, let's just give it a crack. So that's a second thing that probably will keep me a little bit busy in the next couple of months. And then the last thing I thought I'd share is, I think I mentioned our camps in December. I potentially will decide this week, but not going to run, okay? At the moment, we can't go out of a 5K radius, so there's no chance we're getting on a plane and going to Canberra. But this is an image of Ross doing the counter movement jump test with the group of juniors at camp this year. And so we did this in January and February, and we've been trying to build on this. So the plan would be to bring the athletes back in December and do the testing, but actually it's unlikely. So I had a chat to Ross and talked to him about, well, can we do some regional based assessment? So can the guys go into the institutes in Brisbane and Perth and Melbourne and Sydney, and he connect with his colleagues in those spaces, and we run the testing to keep validity, to keep consistency, to connect the athletes within each state, and actually to give us something, a baseline of where are they at, what are the cautions we need to look at going into next year. The coaches haven't had an opportunity to get any feedback in this space, so what does it look like? So by giving the athletes and the coaches this information now and setting it up, it gives them a 2 to 3 month lead in time. It reinforces the fitness, builds upon the previous learning we've done with both the coaches and athletes. We will involve Dartfish TV. So I think I mentioned the seniors. Most of the senior, actually all of the senior athletes around the country are training in some form. So we could do some skill combinations or skill connections where they video and upload and get assessed and get feedback, not for selection, but for feedback. So this, I guess, is something that I'm trying to bounce around and work out, well, what does that look like? What can we do to get the best outcome to go from this, which is that AAS hub, you know, the sprint gates, the jumping, the testing. We do yo-yo test is something that another test that we do. What can we do to go from here and convert and still keep the athletes engaged and focused and moving forward? So yeah, I guess they're three things that we've looked at. And I guess I'm keen to hear from the Kevin, Josh and Linda. I mean, you guys work in your different sports. Well, you know, what are the lessons that you guys have learned? What are some cost-effective gains? How can we build upon what we've done, connect the sports and learn from others, I guess?
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of really good stuff here, Michelle, and I love the sort of innovation and challenge that you're really embracing, because it is really tricky, and I don't think anyone's got the solutions. You know, I think particularly, you know, many of us are just really struggling with, okay, how do we stay engaged? How with this? It's not even how long it is. It's just you don't know. It's not that. If it was 5 months or 12 months or whatever, you'd be able to plan. But because there's that uncertainty, you know, that you're literally just picking off little bits as you can, and you stay as engaged as you can as possible. I think to your last slide there of the cost-effective nature of things, I think that is becoming more and more of an issue as this thing goes along. We're constantly being challenged to do more with less. And it's less money, it's less resources, less people, it's less information, probably, again, more than anything else. So no, I really appreciate the how candid you've been here, and how, like, there's no question about the struggle, but I think there's some really great examples, and it sounds like if you could sort of be a fly in the wall of some of these conversations with your coaches and your athletes, certainly not all happy high fives all the time, but the ebb and flow of these conversations is how do you find that nugget of positivity and opportunity to focus in on in spite of all the chaos. And I think that's the one really positive message that I think that you're able to share here, that it's not all perfect, but you're still able to unpack it all. And so if there's one thing that you wish, sort of back at the beginning of all this that you would have done maybe a little different, is there anything there that you would have, I mean, again, it's a really hard one to reflect on because we're still right in it, but is there anything you would have done differently?
To be honest, Cam, I don't know. I think coaches, and particularly gymnastics coaches, are governed by rules, but governed by deadlines. And I think the biggest challenge has been the goalposts keep moving. I had a conversation yesterday, actually. It's like the rug keeps getting pulled out from underneath you. And there's so much instability that coaches come in, you plan a training session, here's what we're going to get done. And that fits part of the weekly picture or the monthly picture. Like, we're really good at that. We know where everything fits. And now all of a sudden there's no walls and nothing fits. So I think probably one thing that I did with a very small group of coaches who I felt was struggling individually early in the year before everything hit is brought them together in a little community. So I've been having these coffee catch-ups, if you like, with a small group of coaches. And maybe I could have done that more broadly with little collective groups, if you like, because this one particular group of coaches who I still bring them together, but they're now at a point where I think they could operate and support each other. I think maybe to kind of build that concept, because the support from within, they're all going through the same thing, right? The guys in Victoria at the moment are different to the rest of the country. So it's important for them to connect to the rest of the country, but actually it's important for them to pull together. So when we were put in a second lockdown, it was so restrictive. I did a session with all the coaches together just to kind of bring them in to go, okay, tell me what we can do to support you. But actually, I think, Cam, the hardest part is they don't know.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So what can I help them with? You can't help me run a training session. You can't do this. You can't do this. So what can you do? And it's not until they actually look out a little bit to see what's going on that they can think. So navigating support but not being in their face has been hard, I think.
Yeah.
Giving them space to work out their own stuff, both personal and professional, and what's happening in their own environment, both in the gym and at home and everything. I mean, yeah, who would have thought you'd be teaching preps and grade ones online and you've got homeschooling running and you're trying to run a gym class?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the big pieces of just how incredibly uncertain it's been, and it almost feels like that we've just been saying this over and over again like a broken record. One thing, we've probably spoken every couple of weeks since February, and the one thing that I think that you guys have done an amazing job, and I've been lucky to see programs around the world really manage this thing in some way better than others. The one thing that you guys have been able to do is stop. I think that's probably the most terrifying thing for a lot of coaches, particularly to stop. And you mentioned it there, again, one of those overused words of pivot, but you've been able to stop, and you're not the kind of person that strikes me as someone that likes to stop ever. You're constantly moving, you're constantly thinking, but can you talk a little bit more about that ability to stop? Because even the way you said the word, I was like, ooh, yeah. Maybe I need to try that, So what tell us more a little bit about that.
Cam, you're always good at questions. So I think what I've tried to do probably is put myself in their shoes, actually. So I'm a coach. If I was them, there's so much stuff going on you can't navigate what's actually up and what's down and what's going on. So probably for me, what I did was to step back and say, I'm not here to provide solutions. I'm not here to say, okay, do this, Cam, do this. Like, I guess it's about, okay, let's sit back and take a bit of time. So I probably spent a fair bit of time listening to different podcasts, going for a walk, taking the opportunity to go, okay. And probably the other thing that I've done is not pivot and go, like not just have a think, and then I might have written myself some notes or pondered on something a little bit, and then have a conversation with you or with Jean or someone who I've been chatting to. And then I've gone, actually, I think this is a pretty good idea now. So I think that reflection time, I think that forced time to be alone, like I'm in the house by myself. I mean, we've had intermittent times where my kids have been at home because they're on JobKeeper and not allowed to work. But essentially, you're at home and you're like, okay, well, what does this look like for others? So I think we've been forced to stop. And I guess the question then, Cam, is how do we keep that, actually? Because high performance coaching is crazy, right? And how do we bring with us the ability to keep that reflective process, it, if you like, and keep that time and make that time available when everything gets a bit more crazy again.
Yeah. Well, I think that begs probably maybe not the final question, but a pivotal one of, is there anything that you guys have done that you weren't doing before all this that you definitely or probably will keep doing whenever we do get back? Because we will get back. I mean, that's the reality, is we will get back. It's just a question of when. And so can you talk to what you think you might continue doing, because it really has covered things that we didn't expect to have provide?
Yeah, I actually think it's given us a baseline that the virtual connection is critical, particularly where, and the US is the same, like we're so geographically separated that between our national, maybe we don't need, we know our funding is going to go down, right? We know that there's going to be cuts in places. So we have to be thinking, so maybe we don't have a camp every month. Maybe it becomes every 2 months, and in between we have a virtual camp. So definitely that's a concept we will keep. The other thing that we will look at doing is keeping the coaches connected. So when we roll out a new selection policy, I know we've talked about selection policies in the past. Well, actually getting the coaches online and having a conversation so they truly understand it. The National Performance Director, he's going to sit there and explain this is what it looks like. When we have opportunities to bring the gym sports together, so to bring the national coaches who are leading each of those silos separately, to bring them together. It's tough. The time, they train at different times, they've got different interests, but I think they've seen a bit of a light that there's an opportunity to do that. And I think the reality is that we have to be cost effective. So we're going to need to be smarter. And the fact that we've got Zoom, people familiar with it, you know, I've got all but one of the non-English speaking coaches on Zoom who can have a conversation. At the moment, the best I can do for her is put her on WhatsApp. WeChat. I put her on WeChat and I hold it up to the screen so she can see everyone. But everybody else can navigate this. So I think the reality is we know that we can do it and save money. I've started to work with our education team on how we can completely revamp our 9-day academy program. Like that, it's what can we do to make that look different, more cost effective, and actually increase the learning opportunities. So in a nutshell, I think we need to stop and think and reflect and say, what can we bring with us into 2021 that's actually going to enhance, improve, and make what we've been doing better. So I think there's lots that we can do.
Yeah. And again, I think it really comes back to that theme of connecting people. Whether it's the different groups across silos, whether it's coaches, just talking to other coaches. I think, and that for me is one of the things that's really been amazing in this group. I mean, groups that we're a part of that never would have formed if this thing hadn't happened, and having conversations around the planet at all times of the day and all, to be able to connect with Australia at in the evening your time, early our time in the morning, and then have our European buddies all sort of jump on a call to be able to hear some of the really challenging parts of this experience, but also it's really reassuring to know that we and this is coming from a rowing coach, we're all in the same boat, and that I think is what you guys are doing. Like there's very few doing what you're doing in that respect. So
I think you're right, Cam. I think that something which we didn't touch on because I shared different examples. The performance coach webinars that I've been running have actually exposed gymnastics coaches, because that's the space that I work in, with this realm of coaching, which for the coaches, I've had an engagement, 50 coaches come on board on average each webinar we do, and probably about 100 recorded. They're looking at the recordings. So for me, I look at that and I think, okay, they're being exposed to thoughts and ideas, not just from professionals, but from other coaches. But when we do the breakout rooms and discussions, they're actually having conversations with coaches from other sports that they would never have before.
Yep.
And I think that's what the restrictions, the COVID shutdown and everything has provided. And that would never have happened before. It might have taken us 10 years to get to that point.
Yep. The hundreds and hundreds of people that we've all been able to connect with over this period, I think, is only another, a real benefit of taking advantage of this opportunity. So, hey, Michelle, I know we're at the top of the hour. Anything else for the good of the cause? It's always great chatting with you, and I won't let you go. I'll keep bugging you, and we'll figure out more to do. But yeah, brilliant as always, and really appreciate your time.
No worries. More than happy to, and definitely we need to reciprocate and get you on one of my webinars where it's not 4 o'clock in the morning for you.
Awesome, Michelle. Always good to chat. We'll talk to you.
No worries.
All right.
Thanks, guys. See ya.